Bava Kamma Daf Kaf Zayin Amud Aleph and Amud Beis. We start the new parak, Culpability and Responsibility, Adam Mou'ad L'Olam, Chelik Beis, the second section of what we started yesterday, this idea of Adam Mou'ad L'Olam, that a human being is culpable whether or not he had intention to do the damage. If a person does damage, he's an agent of damage, and he is culpable. And this parak HaMeniach, starts with bor. We've had different forms of Nezikin. We've had Shor HaMazik, the different kinds of ox damages, we've had Aish, we've had the fire damage, and now we're looking at bor. And the case here, which is somebody puts a stumbling block or a hole in the Reshut HaRabim, in a place of public access, and either causes damage to others or somebody causes damage to the thing. So in this case, we're back to the famous mingvez, haminiach et hakad. That's what the Mishnah is talking about. A person puts a mingvez in the Reshut HaRabim. It's a silly thing to do, but that's what he did. He put his mingvez down in the public domain. And somebody else comes and trips over it, ushavara, and breaks the mingvaz. We're worried about the mingvaz now. We're not worried about the person who tripped so much. Patur, the person who tripped over the vase, is potur. He's free of responsibility. He doesn't have to pay. Asks the Gemara, Patur, amai patur, why is he patur? Why does this person not have to pay? You should look where you're walking. It's true there's a ming vase in the Reshus HaRabim and one doesn't expect that to be there, but you should look where you're walking. You don't walk into a ming vase. Shmuel Omar ba'afela shonush. So Shmuel says there are different answers the Gemara gives. We don't stay with Shmuel's answer, but it's an important one in the process of reasoning it out. Shmuel says we're talking where it's dark. You're right. If it was light and he could have seen what was in the Reshus HaRabim, then he should have seen what was in Reshus HaRabim. But we're talking in a situation where it's dark or it's misty, foggy, and he's not really able to see very clearly what's there, so he is completely free. Why, says Tosfos? Because lo ibayele le'uyune and onusu. Since he didn't have to look, there was no way he could have looked. It was dark, and there was no way that he could have looked. He is an onus. That's how Tosfos understands Shmuel. So again, a man puts the ming vase in the Reshus HaRabim, another man trips over it, shatters the ming vase. The man who shattered the ming vase is not liable for any damages because he is an onus. Asks Tosfos, based on our Gemara yesterday, but we know that there's no such thing as onus by a human being. Adam mu'ad l'olam, a person is always responsible even if he isn't culpable. So yes, it was dark, he couldn't see it, but he's an Adam. And as an Adam, as a human being, you're always responsible, even if you couldn't help what happened, it was completely beyond your capability of avoiding. Tosfos' thesis then is, as we learned yesterday, that ones gamur lo Rabbi Rachmana. This, that a human being is obligated, even if it's an ones, even if it happens despite his efforts, it's beyond his control, he's still chayev, he's still responsible. That does not apply by ones gamur. So Tosfos introduces us to this idea that we started with yesterday, that there's a spectrum of ones. At one point, there's an ones gamur, and there even a human being is potter. It's completely beyond his control. What should he be chayev for? But if it's partially beyond his control, then he is chayev. And Tosfos then brings three proofs. One of them is from the Yerushalmi that we learned yesterday, two people sleeping. Three proofs that is the case. That where it's not that when it's absolute onus, there's nothing he could have done, it wasn't his fault at all, he is in fact patur. And the way that Tosfos explains is that v'nirei ledakdek, the adam hamazik the mifter ba'ones, this that a human being is potter, is free of responsibility in a case of onus where it's beyond his control, is in cases shehu ke'ein geneva. That's where the onus is similar to theft. Now, we've spoken about the fact that there are two parallel things going on. We're learning about nezikin, about an adam hamazik, a person causes damage with his own property or his own body. In Bava Metzia, we're talking about shomrim. I'm looking after your property, and I didn't take proper care of it, and it got damaged. But we learn one from the other, and there we have the idea of geneva va'aveda. I'm looking after your property. If I've borrowed your property, I've borrowed your car, and it gets stolen, I'm responsible. If it gets lost, we don't know where it is, it's somewhere in Gaza, but we don't know where, I'm responsible. If I am a shomer chinam, if I'm not being paid, I'm not using your car, you said, can I leave my car in your garage while I'm away? And I say, sure, I'm a shomer chinam. So that's one of the lowest dimensions of responsibility, because I'm not being paid to do it. I get no benefit from doing it. I'm just doing you a favor. So in this case, if it's stolen or it gets lost, I'm patur, I'm free of charge. That's considered like an onus. But says Tosfos, geneva and aveda are not the same level. Because when there's an ones which is like geneva is somebody else steals it. It was in my garage. It's not in my garage the next morning. Somebody took it. That's geneva. That's very close to ones. It's beyond my control. But then you've got avedo. Avedo is further on the spectrum. Avedo is it got lost. I actually drove it because you gave me permission to drive it, and you wanted me to keep the engine going and the battery in track, so I drove it. I parked it, and I just cannot remember where I parked it, and there's no sign of it. It hasn't been stolen, no indication that it's been stolen, but it's lost. I just can't find it. That's called aveda. That's a little bit of pshia, that's a bit of carelessness. So geneva is closer to ones, beyond my control. Aveda is also beyond my control. I got lost. I didn't lose it deliberately. It's not total pshia, but it's closer to pshia. Says Tosfos, so you see there's a spectrum. And geneva krova le'ones va'aveda krova le'pshia. We learn in Bava Metzia that geneva, theft, is closer to ones, beyond my control, and aveda is closer to pshia, carelessness. Nireh da'adam ha'mazik chayav. When it's close to pshia, an Adam HaMazik is chayev, then he's chayev, then he's obligated. But if it's ones gomer, it's like geneva, then he's not chayev. Asks the Ramban, we touched on this yesterday as well, you can't bring a proof from the Yerushalmi. What was the case with Yerushalmi? One man goes to sleep, another man puts a ming vase next to his bed. He turns over in the night, shatters the ming vase. Says Tosfos, you see from there that there's a case where it's completely beyond your control, because the Yerushalmi says in that case, you're part of it, even though it's ones. That's ones gomer. Says the Ramban, that's not about ones gomer. This is something else altogether. This has got nothing to do with ones. This is pshia. The reason the first one is potter is because the second one is chayev. The second one was a pasheya. The second one was negligent. And that negligent creates the obligation, and so the first one has nothing to pay because the second one was negligent. So as we learned yesterday, what the Ramban is saying is it's the second one's pshia that we focus on, the second one's negligence. But that's not how Tosfos learned the Yerushalmi back on Daf Daled. At the bottom of the first page of the source sheet, you'll see the Tosfos from Daf Daled. There he brings the Yerushalmi, and he says that's different, that if he brings the ming vase in the middle of the night and puts it next to a sleeping man, and the man breaks it, patur, tehem garmu lo, because the people who put the vase there caused him to damage the vase. Do you see the difference? The Ramban says it's the pshia of the second one. The second one is the careless person. He did the damage. The first person did nothing. Tosfos says, no, it is the first person who did the damage. He turned over in the middle of the night and smashed the vase. But that's Heim Garmulo, they caused him to do it. What does that mean? We've learned that if there's an ones in the case of human damage, it doesn't count. The human being is always culpable. Why is the case of the Yerushalmi It's different. So the Ramban said because he's a posher. Tosfos is saying something different. And we based it on the Rabbi Yonason Milunil yesterday. Rabbi Yonason and Tosfos have an amazing concept that we're going to go a little deeper into this morning. And that is that the second person's pshia converts the first into an ones. The second person's carelessness makes the first person an ones. Well, what about Adam Mu'ad L'Olam? We learned yesterday a person's always a Mu'ad. It removes that principle from him. It cancels that principle out. So normally, if a person does something which is beyond his control, he's not responsible. However, Adam Mu'ad L'Olam. But if there's another intervention by a person who has chosen to intervene, then as we explained yesterday, that first person is no longer the agent of damage. And that's what we want to focus on now, to understand why is that first person no longer the agent of damage. At the end of the day, he did the damage. He turned over in the middle of the night. He smashed the Ming vase. Why does the principle of Adam Mu'ad L'Olam get removed from him? Because in the middle of the night, another person came into the room and put the vase down there. That's what we're looking at over here. As an aside, in order to understand that, the Vilna Gaon has a very important approach, which is he mentions in various different places, and here's one of the places where he articulates it. And that is the integration of the Kabbalistic part of the Torah with the halachic part of the Torah. Now, we never use the Kabbalistic part of the Torah to reason, to draw halachic conclusions, or hardly ever. The halachic conclusions have to be reasoned through methods of halakha. But we will use, of course, the Kabbalistic dimensions in order to understand the halakha, to get a better understanding of it. And in this piece of Vilna Gaon, on the third parak of Mishlei, he talks about Bechol derachecha da'ehu. He talks about the word hu, hey, vav, aleph. So the Mishlei says, know Hashem in all your ways, and he or it will straighten your direction, your ways. And the word da'ehu, he says, means da, hey, vav. And hey vav, hey is chumash, and vav is shas, 6 sedorim of shas. No Tanakh and shas, v'hu yeyasher orchotecha, and here it's hu with an aleph. It's the hey and the vav and the aleph. The aleph is silent, and the aleph means learning. You learn from silence. What does that mean? Says the Vilna Gaon. That's the Kabbalistic part. That's the mysterious part. So if you learn shas correctly, you'll get insights into the Kabbalistic part. You don't have to worry so much about the Kabbalistic part, it's there. But we see this integration of the two. So we learn Gemara when we learn the Matmonim. When we learn Chumash and Rashi, we learn Remez. We learn Pshat here. We learn Remez when we learn Chumash and Rashi. In the Medrash here on Shabbos morning, we learn Drush. We have an additional layer. And sometimes we go as far as the outer layers of Sod, of what's the inner meaning of it. And here we need to look at the inner meaning of it a little bit. So we have the posuk of Ma'akeh. We learned it not long ago. You have to build a parapet around the top of your roof if your roof is flat. It says the Torah, so that you should not be responsible, ki yipol hanofel mimenu, lest the faller falls. From that, the Gemara says in Shabbos, there's a Tanna Rabbi Yishmael, who's the faller? One who is destined to fall in any case. It's not you causing him to fall. Hashem has decided with Bashgacha, this person's life is over, he's going to fall. But it didn't have to be through you. We've got to make sure that we are not the person, because shemegalgelin zchut al yedei zakai v'chova al yedei chayav. Even where something is inevitable, if it's a positive thing, Hashem uses good people as his agents. When it's a negative thing, a destructive thing, that's going to happen in any case, Hashem uses bad people as his agents. Bnei Yisrael were going to be enslaved by another nation. We know that from the Brit Bein Abtarin. But Hashem uses Paro as his agent. It didn't have to be Paro, it could have been. He uses bad people for the agency of bad things. With that in mind, you begin to understand something of the responsibility of somebody who isn't culpable. Because he's not culpable for this, but he's culpable for other things. So if I was the cause of your Ming vase getting shattered, well, your Ming vase was going to get shattered in any case. You were due to lose $30,000 one way or another. And it turned to be out the Ming vase, but it didn't have to be me. The fact that for no choice of mine, I was asleep, I didn't even know there was a Ming vase there, and I do it in my sleep, that's megalgelin choiva al yedei chayev. That means there's something I'm not perfect in, because Hashem chose me to be the agent. And so I am culpable. I remain responsible. Not culpable, but there's something in me that isn't right. Here's another example where you can't learn Nezikin, you can't learn Choshen Mishpat without the spiritual dimension of Torah as well, without the Ruchnis Dikas dimension of Torah. Otherwise it doesn't make sense. So why should a person be responsible for something that was completely beyond his control? Because Hashem did this. This was an act of God. Yes, it was an act of God. He chose you to be his agent. Why did he choose you to be his agent to do something destructive? Is what we need to ask. And that's why you're responsible. But now let's go one step further into the Ohr Chaim HaKodesh on the Vayishma Reuven Vayatzilenu miyadam. Reuven hears and saves Yosef from their hands. Vayomer lo nakenu nafesh. And he says, let's not murder Yosef. Rather, let's throw him into the pit. Ask the Ohr Chaim, but throwing him to the pit is also the same. There's nachashim and akravim, there's scorpions and snakes in the pit. Why is that any better than killing him any other way? Explains the Ohr Chaim, that ha'adam bal bechira v'ratzon v'yachol laharog mishelo nitchayev mita. An important principle in Kabbalah, which the Ohr Chaim highlights here, the Netziv speaks about it as well. A bal bechira, a person of free choice, can override hashgacha. Now, of course, it doesn't mean totally override hashgacha. Hashem, nothing happens without Hashem's allowing it to happen. But if you take out a gun and you shoot another person, you can't say bashet. He was going to die in any case. I was just the agent. A human being can override hashgacha. Now, if we understand that, we begin to understand our sugya. So why is, according to Tosfos, why is an adam is mu'ad la'olam? Why? Because you are responsible even if you're not culpable. But it's beyond my control. This is an act of God. Yes, but God chose you as the agent. And if God chose you as an agent, you were responsible even if it wasn't your fault. So what happens if somebody else intervenes? If it's an act of God caused by a tsunami or an earthquake, then it's an act of God. If it's the reason I damaged was not because of an act of God, but because of an act of another human choice, that human choice has removed my agency. That's what human beings can do. I'm no longer the agent of the damage. The person who made the choice has overruled the natural flow of events. So by putting the Ming vase there, that action, that choice to do that, to do something so careless, that removes from me being able to say, well, it was an act of God. God did this, it wasn't my fault. Well, too bad, but you were the agent. No, I wasn't the agent. In this case, somebody else is the agent. The agent is the person who chose to put the vase in that particular place. So there we get a much bigger understanding of Adam Mu'ad La'olam and the different views, the view of the Ramban, that doesn't apply when somebody else is a posheya, because then the obligation shifts to the careless person. And the view of Tosfos, no, it stays with the first person. He is the one who caused the damage, but he has a p'tur. It's not that he didn't cause the damage, the other caused the damage. He caused the damage. He smashed the Ming vase. But he was an onus. An Adam is never an onus, an Adam is never onus. That's only when he is an agent of God. But when another human being intervenes in God's process and makes choices and decisions that have negative output, that person becomes the principal, and the agent is free. The agent doesn't apply anymore. The responsibility is removed from the agent, and it's taken over by the other person.